Good afternoon. Every year we use these seminars as an opportunity to share our thinking on multi-year trends that will shape investment markets. As a reminder, in 2012 and 2013, we championed financial repression, the idea that central banks would repress interest rates to boost asset prices in the hopes of pushing growth up. We have been living in a low interest rate world ever since. In 2017, we argued that Donald Trump's election would cause the global economy to splinter into walled gardens, where politicians will prioritize the needs of the domestic population over globalization. Since then, global cooperation has suffered and trade wars have opened up. For many years now, we have been arguing that demographic and productivity shifts were slowing the world down. Last year, we reiterated this theme in our presentation on globalization, a world defined by slowing growth and slowing trade. So what comes next? For the last few years, we have been grappling with elephants, or more precisely, the elephant chart of income inequality. This chart was created by Branko Milanovic, an economist at the World Bank. It plots the growth in real income across the world for different percentile groups during the period 1980 to 2016. You can see that those in the lower percentiles, which represent emerging market workers, have done relatively well in a globalizing world. Millions have seen their incomes rise and have been lifted out of poverty. The rich have fared even better. The trunk of the elephant captures the incredible growth in income of the top 1%. Note that we have changed the scale on the horizontal axis and stretched out the percentiles. Even so, this chart shows the tremendous growth enjoyed by the 1%. The segment that has fared relatively poorly is the so-called squeezed middle, the global middle class, a demographic segment that is disproportionately represented by unskilled workers in Europe and the United States. These workers have faced relentless competition from cheaper emerging market labor and have experienced only modest increases in incomes. In reality, the elephant chart illustrates the challenges faced by open democratic societies in the rich world. Inequality has increased not just in income, but across many other dimensions. Years of low interest rates have boosted asset values and widened wealth gaps. Older generations have created and benefited from an economic system that has put the planet on a warming trajectory that will need to be corrected and paid for by younger generations. A yawning gap has opened up between urban and rural centers with regard to income, opportunity, and health. And market power has become concentrated across a handful of companies across industries. The rise in inequality has created a winner-takes-all society that has sowed deep discontent. In recent years, there has been a democratic rejection of the conventional policies that have delivered such a poor outcome for the many in the squeezed middle. Over the past 6 months, as elections have unfolded in a post-Brexit world, it has become clear to us that addressing the inequity within the current economic system is becoming an urgent necessity for politicians of all stripes. To fulfill their electoral mandate, we believe that politicians will seek to level up outcomes for those in the squeezed middle. Moreover, leveling up heralds the beginning of a policy shift towards fiscal activism, funded by continued repression of interest rates. Last December, after leading the Tory party to a resounding victory, Boris Johnson stood in front of Downing Street and laid out the main theme of his leadership.
You ask yourselves, what is this new government going to do? What is he going to do with his extraordinary majority? I will tell you that is what we are going to do. We are going to unite and level up. Unite and level up.
The Johnson Level Up strategy includes increases in government investment on infrastructure, education, technology, and health. The UK's strategy to level up focuses heavily on regional disparities. Philip McCann, a renowned spatial economist and economic geographer, has argued that the UK is one of the most inter-regionally unequal countries in the industrialized world, and almost certainly the most inter-regionally unequal high-income country. Andy Haldane, who is the chief economist at the Bank of England, also chairs the government's Industry Strategy Council. The group has turned the spotlight on the wide disparities in productivity and growth across the UK, which they believe is leading to vastly different outcomes. Today, the northern worker earns, on average, £4 less per hour worked than a worker in the south. Men in Manchester live 9 years less than men in Hampshire. They have categorized the UK into 4 different types of regions based on how productivity has evolved in the 2008 to 2017 period. They classify regions as steaming ahead, losing ground, catching up, or falling behind. From this map, you can see that the steaming ahead regions are geographically concentrated. They're pulling away from the rest of the country, and inequality in the UK is inextricably linked with geography. Boris Johnson is not the only leveller. In 2017, Donald Trump, at his inauguration speech, focused on the so-called forgotten men and women.
We must protect our borders from the ravages of other countries, making our products, stealing our companies, and destroying our jobs. We will bring back our jobs. We will bring back our borders. We will bring back our wealth. And we will bring back our dreams.
For Donald Trump, leveling up is distinctly inward-looking, favoring local over global priorities. It is built upon the belief that rampant globalization and migration have exposed lower-skilled workers to relentless competition from cheaper labor. Taking back control of borders, therefore, is a crucial first step in raising the living standards of these workers. Trump's strategy to level up has a clear focus on using America's market power to extract better terms from all its trading partners in the global economy. The levelers have a distinctly different approach to fiscal policy. They seek to raise the living standards of the less well-off without taxing away the income of the rich. They emphasize pre-distribution, the notion that government should try to prevent inequality from taking place first, instead of trying to fix it with benefits once it has occurred. Signature policies include raising the minimum wage, increasing government investment in infrastructure, education, health, and technology, all of which they believe will improve the outcomes for the less well-off. This is a key difference with the redistributors, who believe that taxing the well-off is vital to restoring equity. The redistributors believe in ultra-progressive income taxes, wealth taxes, and income transfers. Levelers shy away from such measures because they fear that redistribution invariably leads to lower growth and shrinks the economic pie. Even as inequality might decline, everyone is worse off. But how exactly do the levelers propose to pay for their policies? Levelers believe that governments can borrow to spend without increasing the interest burden. They believe that today there is a proverbial free lunch. Because inflation is benign, interest rates can remain low, even as governments increase their borrowings. There is also a tacit expectation that central banks will continue to suppress interest rates. For the levelers, Japan provides a fantastic template. Interest rates have remained zero, even as the government's debt burden has risen to over 200% of GDP. The levelers believe that borrowing and debt in the US and UK have plenty of scope to rise. If Japan is any guide, the public purse can be materially loosened. Borrowing can rise without increasing interest rates. They believe that governments need to throw off the shackles of austerity and invest in their citizens. Spending on policies that raise productivity of the less well-off will ultimately raise growth and the economic pie, and everyone can be better off. So will the theory hold up? This chart is an attempt to illustrate the trade-offs. It plots the top and bottom quartiles for after-tax income in the UK since 1999. You can see that the gap in income between these groups has widened over the past 2 decades. We now project out a few scenarios into 2035. The first scenario is a continuation of the status quo, and you can see that this leads to a further widening of the income gap between the top and the bottom quartiles. In the next scenario, we chart a hypothetical trajectory of successful leveling up, where investment in education, health, and infrastructure pays off and raises the productivity and the wages of the less well-off. In this scenario, the incomes of the bottom quartile start to rise, even as the incomes of the top quartile continue as before. Successful leveling off raises all boats. In the last scenario, we chart a hypothetical trajectory of unsuccessful levelling up, a so-called levelling down scenario. Here, levelling up policies raise wages, but not the productivity of the bottom quartile. In this scenario, the top quartile experiences a decline in income because the economic pie shrinks. Levelling down is more akin to redistributionist policies. In reality, the successful of levelling up crucially depends on how effective these policies will be in converting investment in education, infrastructure, and health into tangible improvements in productivity, and ultimately raise the living standards, keep inflation low, and grow the economic pie for everyone. It is the proverbial have your cake and eat it too. So which one of these scenarios will play out? Today, we have little sight of the types of policies being proposed, and it's difficult to assess how successful they might be. What we do know is that a multi-year policy shift is underway, with fiscal activism at its core. To conclude, we believe that the world will continue to globalize. Shifting demographics and productivity will slow global growth and global trade. Walled gardens, where local priorities take a clear precedence over global commitments, will continue to thrive. National and industrial policies will be developed, and borders will be more controlled. Monetary policy will remain exceedingly accommodative to support growth in an indebted world and a slowing world. We expect interest rates to remain low and go lower still. Finally, we believe that after a decade of monetary policy activism, policymakers will embark on fiscal activism, focused on pre-distribution policies aimed at leveling up those that have been left behind after decades of rampant globalization. Today, it's unclear whether these policies will be successful in raising productivity or just inflation. Leveling up is a high-stakes shift, one where the rewards can be rich and the risks are manifold. Thank you.